If DNA is a parasite, then it may be the most successful one in history because it has convinced the host that they are one and the same. We don't just carry DNA, we are the expression of it. Now, taking this idea a bit further, there's this concept called memetics. It suggests that ideas, or memes, behave in a similar way. Just as DNA uses the body to reproduce, ideas use the mind. They spread from person to person, sometimes even pushing individuals to sacrifice their own well-being for the sake of a belief or an ideology. And then there's a more intense perspective. DNA may not be conventionally seen as a parasite because, well, it keeps the host alive. But one could argue that this is precisely what makes it so effective, keeping organisms alive, maintaining the system, while continuously driving them to replicate. From this view, life begins to look less like a gift and more like a kind of confinement, a continuous cycle, sustained by instinct, where pleasure and pain act as signals or even restraints. This line of thinking moves into philosophical territory, ideas like antinatalism or biopessimism, where the will to live is seen not as freedom, but as something imposed. In this framing, DNA is not just a passive code, it becomes something like a jailer, not through force exactly, but through influence, through hunger, desire, fear, attachment. It keeps the organism engaged, keeps it moving, keeps it reproducing. And when you look closer, there are actual biological mechanisms that seem to reflect this kind of logic. For instance, transposable elements, sometimes called jumping genes. They make up nearly half of the human genome, and they don't really serve a clear purpose for the organism. They simply copy and paste themselves into different parts of the genome, sometimes causing mutations or even diseases like cancer. They persist, not because they help, but because they can. Then there's something called meiotic drive. Normally, genes have a 50-50 chance of being passed on, but some don't play fair. They actively destroy competing sperm or eggs so that they get inherited more often, even if this reduces fertility or harms the population as a whole. The gene still succeeds. And then there's antagonistic pleiotropy. Some genes provide advantages early in life, like increased energy or fertility, but later contribute to serious conditions like cancer or neurodegenerative diseases. By that point, the gene has already been passed on. So there's no pressure to maintain the host anymore. And finally, there's what could be called a biological treadmill. From a neurological standpoint, we are wired to never remain satisfied. Dopamine gives a brief sense of reward after eating, achieving, reproducing, but it fades quickly, and that fading creates desire again, a constant loop of wanting, seeking, chasing, because if satisfaction were permanent, the system might slow down or even stop. So instead, it keeps going. And from this perspective, what we call life begins to resemble a system, one that sustains itself through cycles of drive, discomfort, and repetition, where the line between self and mechanism becomes increasingly unclear.